Hello and welcome to the Believe You Can Paint channel, where we believe everyone can paint if they just believe it enough to try. First, a big thank you for all the views on the Dire Cthulhu video where we explored contrast paints and layering them. I hope that at least one person came away motivated to try painting. For this episode, the goal was to do the exact opposite of layering contrast. I want to see what kind of look we can achieve with a single coat of contrast. Since the goal of this show is to get minis table ready, we are also going to spend some time talking varnishes and some options that might fit your needs. So let's get started. We're picking up with Abhoth already primed with Citadel Color Wraithbone undercoat. That is the contrast undercoat. And I've already mixed up some Basilinium Gray and Lamian. So the Basilinium is a contrast, the Lamian is a medium. And I just wanted to experiment with the medium and see how it reacted with the contrast paint. Honestly, I couldn't tell a big difference. I did experience a little bit more control on the bubbles. You can see I got some pooling on it, and it seems to be flowing a little bit slower, but not a ton. So I've got the contrast medium now, and I'm going to try it with it also and see how different it is, so maybe I can give a suggestion. Abhoth was described with a pool of gray. That's the figure we're painting here. So I wanted to do the base as a pool of gray and kind of build the color up and really accentuate the brain and the tentacles. And so I thought the gray base would look really neat with him, kind of something nondescript, not flashy, and not to pull away from what we're doing with the rest of the model. So I'm going through and just coating everything. You'll notice I do leave some of the contrast on top of the bubbles in this one. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm going to go in later on and kind of put a shine on the bubbles. I knew that I was going to color those for sure. That way they could stand out. I wasn't sure what color I was going to use at this point, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So I am leaving it pulled up on there, and that's just kind of giving me a point to build some glare off of. So we'll see that here in a little bit as I get into doing it. As I said previously, one of the goals of the episode is to see what kind of look we can get with a single layer of contrast over the undercoat. Now, later on, we're going to not stick to that, but there will be a point where we'll look at exactly what kind of effect we got, and then we'll go in and add some detail. And the reason being is because I just honestly fell in love with painting the model. It come out really, really great, and I wanted to just add a little more flair to it to give it a really good look. Now we're to the Dark Oath flesh, and we're going to take off on the melted skin looking parts. So the Dark Oath flesh, I'm just again doing that upward motion, and you'll see that the shadows are filling in nicely. This Dark Oath flesh, it really, really was a perfect match for this model. And you're going to get that sometime, especially with these contrast paints. You're going to find if you get some big flat areas, you maybe don't have a good fit. There's almost no flat areas, and so the contrast paint is just doing wonders. And you can see there we're getting good shadows underneath, thin coats over what is a little bit flat, those high spots. So it looks like he's got some light shining on him. And really, no technique going on, just shoving the brush in there and putting it on. Alright, so we're going to bring on some music. We've got Mandroid Echo Star on their album Citadels. This is the instrumental version of Ethereal Dawn.
some strange fantasy. Little bird in my dreams, and then she says to me, oh, she says that if you give to me the strongest of keys, I'm free forever. And if you needed me to be what you dreamed, I'd sleep forever. And I never will break your heart. I never will break your heart.
Alright, we're back wrapping up with some Plague Bearer flesh here. And this is what I'm going to call a single coat of contrast. Now, of course, we did go over the top of the contrast in a couple places, like with the greens on the base, and then also a little bit of touch up in there where we missed a spot on the flesh. But for the most part, this is one coat of contrast. We went right over the top with the greens, so nothing fancy there. You can see the flesh come out particularly good. You have clearly defined shadows, clearly defined edges. I think that part come out great. The base is splotchy and mottled. You would not want that if you were doing something besides a nasty, slimy base. But for this, I think it works. The greens, they're catching light. They used that underneath coat to kind of give them a dark spot, so that did exactly what I wanted. You know, the pinks on the pink on the brain looks pretty good too. I think. I feel like it come out pretty solid. Now for the bad parts. Again, the modeling is pretty hefty. The brain doesn't have any light effect on it. I think I went too heavy, to be honest, when I put it on, and you'll see me struggle to get that effect back later in the video. The tentacles are the main thing that you're going to see that did not come out well with the first coat, or that's actually even a first coat and some touch up even, and you can still see they're just really, really tidy. And I think there's a couple factors going into that. One, the purple is a little tricky to use. The purple over white, sometimes you get really, really good color. Sometimes it really likes to streak. You really have to have the exact right amount on there, which doesn't work well with the contrast paints because they're so thin and come out so fast. It's hard to get a really precise amount on there. So I think that's part of it. Another part of it is the tentacle shape. The contrast really needs crevices to get into, and the tentacles are pretty much crevice free. They're all smooth, and so really you're relying on your ability to put the paint on a smooth surface, which becomes a real challenge with the contrast paints. A thicker paint would cater to that better. Another factor in how those tentacles look is there was no medium. And I think a medium might be able to bring the contrast paint to a thickness that it'll stick a little better and go on a little smoother. I think that could probably fix it. So moving into what we're doing now, I really liked the model. I thought, probably table ready with just a couple colors and a little bit of and just using the contrast. I thought a lot of people probably, if you've never painted, you'd be perfectly fine with that level of detail, and I thought it looked pretty good. Now, it didn't look as good as I wanted it to, and somewhere around the 10-minute mark, I just got to really thinking, man, that flesh looks really good. I need to give this bottle some more detail. So I went in with the Wraithbone, as you saw a moment ago, and I hit the spine. There's actually a spine inside that flesh that I painted flesh colored from the start. So I went through and put the whites on and brought that spine back out. We're going to use some contrast on it here in a moment. Now I'm going through, this is our first varnish we showed on the show, aside from the floor varnish that I sprayed on Dire Cthulhu. So This is Vallejo Gloss Varnish. It's one of my favorites, especially for Cthulhu Wars, because it gives a shine. So a lot of these are slimy monsters like what we're painting right here. I really, really like the effect it gives. I think it's also important to note that if you've never worked with varnishes, they serve a really important purpose. Not only protecting your model, but also giving it a finish over the paint. So you get those glosses and those mattes, and you can make things look the way they're supposed to. Oftentimes I cut that corner because I'm really looking for playability and a strong finish, so I don't want my paint coming off on people's hands or anything like that, and they get handled a lot. People really like to play around with them. I do a lot of demoing, so it's people that aren't used to playing wargaming or miniature gaming sometimes, and so it serves me better to put on that heavy varnish sometimes. So now we've switched over to the skeleton horde, and for it, we're just going through and hitting that spine. Everywhere that I painted white earlier in the wraithbone is now getting dyed to that skeleton horde color. And again, I think I said it last time, but this is one of those premier colors. Skeleton horde, it looks like bone. If you've got a skeleton army or got to paint bone, it is kind of a yellow dingy color in the highs, and it goes to a brown in the darks. Into the low spots, and it looks really, really great. Now I've switched back over to the Wraithbone, and I'm just doing some touch up here. The Volupus Pink had gotten onto the skin, and it looked okay, but I wanted it to be tidier. So I'm going through and I'm painting all of it white, and then we're going to go back in with our Dark Oath Flesh and dye it back to skin color. Let's continue to watch me putting on some detail here, and I'm going to come back and talk about varnishes a little bit and wrap up. All right, so we're back and we're picking up now. We're doing some final touches. I noticed these little pieces attached to the brain, and I thought those would look really cool as like skull fragments. And so we're coming in with the wraith bone, turn it white, and then dye it back to skeleton horde. As that dries, I'm switching over to the Vallejo matte varnish. And so what I'm doing here is I want the skin and the bones to have a matte varnish on them. And that way they look kind of leathery, not shiny, just like real skin would look. So going over that with the matte varnish, and that'll set off good contrast with the green gloss varnish that we've got on it, and the gloss varnish that's on the tentacles, the gloss varnish that's on the brain, and the gloss varnish that's on the base. So I think that looks really nice as a final product, and it makes a lot of sense. So that's a good rule of thumb if you're first starting out. Matte goes on skin, gloss goes on shiny stuff. So there's some leeway as you get more and more advanced, but starting out, that's a really good rule of thumb. So now switch into the gloss varnish and just running through all the tentacles, hitting everything that doesn't have a shine to it here, giving it a nice finished wet look. A note about the brain there. So you'll see I dry brushed it white with the P3 Marrow White, and then went over it with the contrast paint again, and still did not get a level of contrast that I was looking for. So we're going to try that one more time. And really, that's entirely a product of me putting too much contrast paint on. And I think that's, from what I've seen on the internet, that's a pretty steady theme right now as the contrast paints are new and people are experimenting with them, is if you put them on too heavy, you're not going to get what you want. Now, if you put them on too thin, you might also not get what you want, and you'll have to go back and hit it again. But really, putting it on too heavy has been the primary mistake I've been seeing. So here goes that skeleton horde. I've said it a few times now. This is the one of my favorite contrast paints. You put it on, and it just makes it look like bone. It's beautiful. Switching back to a gloss varnish here. And this is the part. This is something I do, and I don't see it as often in the tutorial videos. And maybe there's some reason for that. Maybe it's a big no-no, but I like to do this. So I'm mixing the contrast orc flesh with Vallejo gloss varnish, and the idea is that you'll get this semi-transparent glaze that still has the properties of the varnish. That's kind of my idea. So you'll see it's just greening it up more, but it's keeping the shine. And it's kind of like, it's a way to do that in one step. And to me, it makes for a little bit smoother finish. You have a little more control. And I really like it for like water effects, is just dyeing the varnish and using it that way. And I hadn't done it with the contrast paints until right here, and it turns out it looks pretty good. I like the outcome. So you can see in that little puddle right there in the front and right here on the side, it just filled in, and it really made them pop. I like it. And you can see I wiped away some excess there with an empty brush. Nice and easy. So now we're going in. This was new for me on this one. I've used the technique a little bit, but never intentionally. It's kind of been passive, but this is stippling, and this is my first go at it. It didn't quite get the effect I wanted, but it did get a good effect. So I imagined a little bit of a light source coming from the front of the model, and so what I'm doing is I'm taking that Citadel Air Moot Green, and I'm just tapping it on the front side of the model here to illuminate the front side of those bubbles, to make it seem like they are catching some light and reflecting them back towards the front. And I think at this distance, so we're like maybe 6 inches from the model, the camera is, and it's wide angle, so it gives a little bit more distance, but I think it looks pretty good. And then the cool thing with stippling is it goes on, it's pretty much dry by the time you can switch bottles, so I just come right back in with a clear gloss varnish, just straight gloss, and that's just to brighten them all the way up. I wanted them to really shine, and shine more than the other spots that are covered in gloss. And so you can see we almost have like a marble effect, or emerald, like I said earlier. That kind of clear, um, illuminated effect. So just a little touch up on the arm there, the Ren flesh. I wanted to really offset it from the rest of the flesh to make sure it was clear that was not a part of Abhoth. That's actually just some dude's arm. So, and then back in with the Dark Oath flesh, but a little bit lighter, and that's just to get the fingers and the shadows and everything in there. Here's another piece of fragment that I thought would look good as a bone. It kind of looked like another chunk. And this goes back to what I spoke about in the other videos. I really look for little pieces to really make it pop out, and that's the green on the skin and the green and purple on gray and these bone fragments. I felt like those were things that just really made it stand out, so I go for it. So going into the Fulgrim pink here. So this is an edge. This is one of the more technical paints. I think they may be discontinued now. I caught this on sale as well as all those paints back there in the background. So it's Fulgrim pink. I just dry brush it on very lightly, and it's just to get that lighter pink color that I was looking for. And I still don't know if I got what I was looking for, but this was as close as I got. I thought this looked pretty good. We had a lot of contrast once I had it on, so I'm just applying it, and then I'll smooth it out here. By the way, once again, that is a makeup brush that I'm using, and that was a cheapie off of Amazon. It come with like 30 brushes, and those Army Painter brushes I was using, those are awesome. I really suggest using those. They have a triangle handle, so it gives you a lot of control. And their brushes are just really high quality. They have sets that come with 3 different brushes. I've got the Insane Detail, the Regiment, and the Psycho that I use, and I love all 3 of those brushes. They're some of my favorites. I save them just for when I need a brush that will help me do better. Here's our final product. He did take longer than I wanted him to, but if we look at that first layer, which was the original goal of the video before I went off on my detail tangent, we were at about 35-40 minutes or so not too bad. Thanks for watching, and please remember, believe you can paint. Just try it. You can do it.